I'm not actually going live yet. I think maybe I'm
Mhm.
going live. I'm going live. Oops. Oops. I think I'm live. I mean, we can go live. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
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 But
We are live.
hold on.
Yeah.
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 But
We are live.
oh, that works beautifully. Okay. Never mind. Hold on. I'm gonna stop streaming again. Let's do this again. And then in theory, this should work. Maybe. Let's make sure I'm actually live in all of these places. Are you excited?
Yeah. I'm
Cool.
excited.
Yep. Okay, we're live on YouTube. We're live
Nice.
on
You want to shift
Twitch.
to like the
Are you excited?
gallery view?
Yes, I'm gonna change quick call. Hold on. Where do I do that? Here we go. Gallery view. That is a very great call. Cool. Let me just tweet that out to make sure that people actually see this. Okay. Tweet. Okay, cool. We are live. I am gonna keep half an eye on Twitter in case there's any questions that come in. I also have the chat open, so if anybody in the chat asks a question, we should be able to answer that.
Sweet.
How's it going?
It's going good. It's like staying indoors, staying healthy.
Nice.
Can't complain.
Nice. You're in Amsterdam, right?
Yeah.
When did you move there? It's pretty recent, right? Last year or something?
Yeah, sometime. Yeah, it's been I think 6 months now.
Nice. How do you enjoy it so far?
I like it. Like it's one of the cities that is car free almost. Like the city has a weird hatred of cars, which I really like. Like I don't know how to drive. I've never had a car in my life,
Right.
so it's like it's my vibe.
That's awesome. So do you just ride around a bicycle all day? When you're allowed to go outside, that is.
I mostly walk around. Like the city
Nice.
is also super small, so you can just get to most places by walking.
That's awesome. And you moved there, and then you started to work at Code
There's a
Sandbox, right?
lag. Oh, I'm sorry. I lost you for like a whole minute there.
Oh no. I hope that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
I was saying you're working at Code Sandbox. What are you working on there?
Yes. So I work on the app, right? There's just 9 of us, so which kind of means that everybody works on the same thing.
Yeah, right. Of course.
Um, but in that, like, most of the time I spend on like this thing I always spend on, which is like components, and then composing things up with components that people use.
Nice. That's
But
awesome.
yeah, I try to stay away from the backend. A bunch of our backend is an Elixir, which I like can't even start.
Right. I see. So, how does that tie into your recent work? Talk to us a little bit about what you've been doing with React UI. Where did that come from? Um,
Mm-hmm.
what is your plans there? Where's it going? Tell
Yeah,
us
so I started
the
working on
story.
this. Yeah, so I started working on this sometime last year. So this is after I left Auth0, and I used to be on the design system team there. And then after I left, I really missed working on this design systems as a whole, but especially on the components bit. So there's like so many things that I learned, and there were so many things that I wanted to try out that I never got to. So then I decided, okay, I have to work on something. And then I always wanted to build like an open source component library, which is like a lot of people have told me is a really bad idea. because one, you can't really make components for everyone else. And no matter how flexible it is, it can't be flexible enough to solve people's use cases. Or like if it does, then it's too flexible and it's just a lot of work. Right. And I've been thinking about it. I think there was a blog post a while back by Brent Jackson where he said that like an open source component library would never be a good idea, or he said he would never make one. I think that's what he said. But then I think he's changed his mind on that as well now. But yeah, so I've been thinking about like the whole concept for a while, and then I had a few ideas that I've learned over like since I started working, so like 2 or 3 years, and I wanted to like compress all of them into one library and hope that we can finally have a customizable component library.
Right. And so what are some of those ideas that are in React UI that you're particularly excited about?
Okay, so where do we start? I have like a really long list.
Nice. Walk us through it.
Like I wrote this post. Okay, can I share my screen?
Yeah, I think you should be able to. Let's try it.
Let's see. Yep. Okay, I'm in. Cool. So
hold on, give me 1 second because I don't think the stream is picking that up. Oh, it is. Never mind. Oh, that totally works. Cool. Yeah, go ahead.
Nice. Okay. So yes, I wrote this post which is like all the old and new ideas in React UI. And you can see it's a long list, but I'm going to be very quick about it. Like 10 minutes, let me try to get through. So the biggest or like one of the core concepts is just having design tokens. So, instead of hard coding all your CSS or all your values, you just say, let's make some guidelines, right? Like a brand color should always be this. And then you codify it, right? So the place where I took this concept, this is like old. So it's from Lightning Design System. I think Gina is the one who coined the term design tokens. And then this is how they did it in SCSS back in the day. And now we do it in JavaScript. But the idea is like, don't hard code shit. And modular scales is something from the design world. And it's been around for a really long time. And I'm kind of surprised that us developers haven't gotten onto it sooner, because this kind of made design accessible to me. It kind of broke the thing between like design is not art, it's mostly science, right? And the concepts are like, if you want a nice vertical rhythm to your website, just don't open the dev tools and like see what looks good and copy paste it. Try to have a system around it. And so there's like some theory I've tried to link here to the theory, but the idea is just like, if you're using a 4-point grid, then just use units. So you never say, let's use 14.2 pixels. You say, let's use 4 units on the scale, or let's use 6 units on the scale if you want more. So that's like modular scales is basically, these two are the big design ideas. Yeah. And then how do you represent them in your React apps? So you need some sort of a specification. Like in Auth0, I remember we created our own bespoke config to do this. I think this was before Style System and System UI came around. But System UI is one of the specs. And I was like, cool, I don't want to argue. I just want to use some specs. So I'm going to hop onto this.
Nice.
So it's a JavaScript object, and which means you can play around. You can put a function if you want. Like it's JavaScript. So you kind of get all the flexibility and all the weirdness of JavaScript. Mm-hmm. And all of that credits to like System UI and Brent Jackson. Moving on, how do you get it into React, right? How do you access these tokens in React? So this is how we used to do it, where we would just import tokens. And then we would say, okay, this is style components. So you just like interpolate it until we realized tokens should be themable because we need themes. And then I was like, okay, this can't work. So I've tried to credit everyone in this, but it's like my memory is not, I don't have memory. I don't have the concept of memory. So I've tried to research and like put things there. Maybe they're wrong, maybe they're right. So theme provider was 2016. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that somewhere must have been 2016. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Nice. So so theme provider lets you pass theme, or in this case, you can pass your tokens, and then that makes them accessible inside every component without having to import them. And then it's on runtime. So they also change, which is perfect.
Yeah.
then the next concept is like, this is cool, but what is even cooler if your styles you're aware of your tokens. So if you already have a spec, in this case, system UI, instead of doing background color is theme.colors.brand, I really want to say background color is brand. And because it's a color, it should read from theme.colors. And so again, Brent Jackson, I think we should just have him here. So he built style system, which is exactly the idea here. And then style system has like a giant table where it's aware of like these CSS values should read from these token values.
Yeah.
And because it's connected to system UI, you just kind of get that all for free. So this is like all of the base ideas. And then I started putting my flavor on them. So for example, there's an element primitive in React UI. And this is kind of sitting at the base of every component. So every time you start a component, you say element, and you say it should be a header. And this is the CSS for it, right?
Mhm.
And you can put it in a different file or put it in the same place. I honestly don't care. But it's connected to the theme, which is the important part.
Yeah.
And so the concept of having a base element isn't new either. It's like pretty old. But the box component in Rebase is kind of the first one, I think, of its kind, which made this popular in React.
Right.
And then, of course, the component from Reach or like from Ryan Florence in general was kind of like the first one of like really abusing the power of React
Yeah.
for like good things. Next up, it's classes, not inline styles. I feel like if I don't say this, somebody's going to be mad. So I just want to like, this is more like a, please, it's
right.
CSS. Right? So like the CSS prop, all of these styles inside this are interpolated. They're put in the head as a style. It's a class name. It's not inline styles. And this one was really hard to find. Like, who came up with the idea of replacing this and with a class name?
Yeah.
And I think it was Oleg.
Yeah.
All the way back in 2014, which is so cool because in 2014, I was definitely not thinking about React also.
Yeah, JSS Oleg has been ahead of the curve for the past half a decade now. JSS had so many good ideas, even in the first version. It's incredible. Anyways, keep going.
Amazing. Yeah. I'm going to look at what he's up to now. I'm sure there are ideas we should steal from there.
For sure.
So next up, the concept. So this is like, we're still talking about design tokens, right? And putting brand colors and putting your scale and grid over there. But then Sarah Federman, who used to work on Adobe's design system, she introduced me to this thing called component tokens. So before she like explained it to me, I used to treat like component tokens the same as design tokens. But the cool thing about like the main thing that I took away was that component tokens are things like, if you have an error alert, you probably want the same background and the same foreground across all your platforms. And you can't really represent that in CSS or in JavaScript. So it has to be something that can get ported to all your platforms, but still be represented in a single place. So that it's like your design decisions about your components live in a single place, but then they get distributed. So I thought that was a really cool idea. It isn't super relevant to React UI because React UI is like for React for the web. So I don't even know how this stuff is going to work for native yet. So, but what I really found cool is like, because React UI is an open source library, it will end up working with different applications with different themes, right? So if I build, say, a tooltip component, or let's stick to the alert. If I make an alert component which has an error state, I don't want to hard code the error state. I wanted to pick the error state from your application, right? So if there's a spec for the design, for the token of components, then it would look different in your application and my application, but it's the same component. So that I thought was really cool. And then in implementation terms, it's like you need to access component selectors. So sorry, kinda React UI uses emotion under the hood. And what's interesting about like all of the CSS and JS library is that you can have nested styles, right? Like you used to in Sass in 2006, which is amazing. So you could just like put your styles and you can have pseudo selectors and you can add child selectors. But when you're building React components, you're not really working with HTML selectors. You want to select a component, right? You need a component selector.
Yeah.
So this was Style Components V2 3 years ago. How does it feel to get old, Max?
It feels pretty weird, let me tell you.
3 years ago, the concept of like selecting components, you import it and then you can put it in your inside your backticks and it interpolates, or an object you just make it a key, and this gets replaced by the generated class name, which
Yeah.
I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
So I definitely stole that idea. But in React UI, you kind of you don't have to import it, you can just put it here. And this is like a slightly weird idea where if it's capitalized, it means it's a component, right? It's how React figures out what is a component and what is an HTML element in JSX.
Yeah.
So you just drop it. And this is using like the element doc. So if you create with element, then you have to give it a name. So for example, if this is a para, I use data component, I attach it there. And that's what I use to target it.
Yeah, right.
Which is totally stolen from how Reach UI does it.
So do I understand that correctly? The sort of link nested object gets replaced by a data component equals link selector basically in the CSS.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So instead of like taking the generate or like waiting for the generated class name, I can take this, which again makes it slightly more portable across applications.
Yeah.
And the interesting part is that I reintroduced name collisions in CSS, right?
Yeah.
Like we tried to run away from this. I've kind of brought it back. But because it depends on, like I got two attributes here, right? It's called data component. So if I call it something even more generic like data React UI component, the collisions are still limited because the name is not important. It's the combination that's important. So it just felt like a really good idea at the time. We're going to see if it backfires or not. Moving on, now you're building components. So layouts and marginless components.
Yes.
I really had to like go really back because I've been doing this for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I had to like find who did I learn it from?
Yeah.
So I learned it from Nicole Sullivan first, like in 2009. She had this thing called object-oriented CSS, where she talked about separating skin and structure, which is how we talk about like smart and dumb components now. So it's like all the way back in 2009. But I think like atomic design is how it really got spread far and out. And of course, I was kind of thinking about them, but I didn't really realize how to use them with layouts. So I was a big fan of margin utilities, right? So you would add an avatar and you put a margin on it, and that's how you would do it. Yeah. So React UI still has margin utilities because they're awesome. But Andres, he's a Bootstrap 0. He kind of opened my eyes to like things like stack and having grids. And which is where like I learned about like just having a stack component kind of frees up your mind from all layout concerns. So for example, here, this is a horizontal stack. It's aligned in the center with a gap of 2. Yeah. The gap property is kind of, it wants to be flex gap, which is a spec. It's a proposal. It's not there yet. Man, so it's like a so it's like a polyfill of the gap flex gap property.
Yeah.
But the cool part is like you can start nesting them and you can create like these really cool UI. Yeah. And I think this is like 4 or 5 nested stack, and it can be responsive. So it just kind of makes composing things super easy. Yeah. But I have to give credit to like the Gap, or I think like Braid design system calls it Space, right? But yeah, that's where I saw like the first polyfill, and then I just started digging up all component libraries. So Tailwind has.
Out of curiosity, how do you polyfill FlexGap? I've seen a couple different ways of doing it. I'm curious how your stack works under the hood.
Yeah, so I looked at like what Braid does. They use padding. Yeah. I looked at what Tailwind does. Tailwind has a polyfill too. They use a margin, but they also put it on the parent, so they have to like minus something on the parent. I didn't get it, but I've seen it around. React UI uses margin,
Yeah.
but with a like not last child nonsense.
Yeah.
So like if you look at this one, this has a margin right of
Yeah.
16
Not last
pixels,
child. Right.
right? And I'm still so Braid creates a wrapper around each of these
Yes.
children
They create a
with a
div around
padding
every child.
inside,
Yeah.
and that's interesting because I've always wondered how much of like the API should leak out,
Yeah.
right? Like, should there be a stack item or should there just be elements inside a stack? And
Yeah.
then you say, I want this to grow or not grow, right?
Yeah.
Like, who controls that part?
Yeah.
So it's been interesting until we get an actual proposal. I think we're going to get like 10 different types of implementations
I
till we settle on
honestly
one.
can't wait for FlexGap to be an actual thing. It is exactly
Yeah.
what we need.
Yeah, exactly. And what's like, now that we're talking design tokens, when you say gap 2, you'd expect it to use 2 units from your spacing scale.
Yeah,
right?
so it
And
sort of
that has
combines
been so
the
cool.
the ideas ahead that came before with sort of this modern way of laying out React apps, right?
Yep. And let me show you this thing. So this constraint-based design, I've tried to. This is the booking form from Airbnb.
Yeah.
Right. This is the first thing you see, and I kind of broke it down. There's like, if you look at it, there's just stack and gap. That's all that is happening, and all of the units are multiples of 8.
Nice.
Which is not a coincidence, and that's why it looks so neat and so structured.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the inputs are 48, the gaps are 16, the label gap is 8.
Nice.
And implementing this was super easy because you just have to say stack and gap and stack and gap. So,
okay.
kind of just works.
I want to dig in here a little bit. I've got a couple questions there. I got to figure out where I want to start. So one of the things that's very interesting about Braid, the Seek design system, is that they have this text hack where they remove the spacing around the text. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So that is very interesting to me because even with modular scales in a theme, your entire layout is not going to be consistent because the text in the browser has space around it, and the line height isn't exactly on a grid. It's just the line height, whatever the browser thinks is the line height, right?
Yep.
Have you thought about including that in React UI? Have you thought about adding that into a text component of some form?
I have. So there's a text component, and this is something that, so we use like a part of the skeleton of React UI in Code Sandbox.
Yeah.
So I've been working on them on the parallel. So the element is also the thing that we use at Code Sandbox. And this is something that comes up multiple times. And it's like the problem itself is slightly unfortunate that you have a line height, which is greater than the visual space that the text actually consumes.
Yeah.
And we've been like jumping around with that idea where one of the ideas what Braid does is just strip off any extra white space by putting like negative spacing there, right? The other one is you rarely see this in effect with so we use inter, and inter has a very thin extra white space.
Right.
So if you're using like a single line of text, right, and you put line height 1, which is, I've made that the default in text now.
Yeah.
You rarely notice the like there is some discrepancy for sure, but it's so tiny that you don't really notice it. Like it doesn't mess up the vertical rhythm.
Yeah.
But the moment you have a multi-line, then you're screwed, because then you have to be really smart about what is the line height and how do I not make it mess up, right? So
here's
it's something
here's
that
what
I'm thinking of.
I'm asking because I'm actually very interested in this hack, because if you can get that to work, in theory, every single layout you have across your entire app, every single page is always consistent. And the only thing, as soon as you have all of these ideas that React UI has in place, which is not that uncommon nowadays, right? Like people are using this theme idea, people are using this modular scale idea. Not enough people do it, but people do it, right? But even then, the one problem you always have is the text and the line height. Every single time to get that on a grid is really, really difficult. And the way they solve that in Braid is really enticing. just because it would mean that every single layout you have is always consistent, which is why I'm digging into this, because I think it's very interesting. However, it is so extremely hacky. I tried to make it work for I'm rebuilding my website right now, and I tried to use that hack, and I spent probably an hour or two just trying to get it to work, and then I got it to work, and then it broke as soon as you increase the font size, and I was like,
yeah,
damn
that's
it. And
the
I want it to be a thing, but it's just a little bit too hacky. And I feel like if somebody could solve that, if there was just a text component that I install, and then some kind of visual tool where I can like measure the white space and specify it, right?
Yeah.
And then it does all the calculations, that'd be huge. Literally, I would use that in a heartbeat. But anyways.
I think that's the tricky part about it. It's like, even when I was trying to do that for Inter, you have to do it for every font.
Yeah.
And every font has different line heights inside them. So, and the browser doesn't obviously measure that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this problem. So you kind of have to like drag it into Figma, measure how much minus it should be, put that in the browser, see if it works. And then the moment you have a paragraph with line height, it's screwed, and then you have to do it again. So it's like 3 or 4 variables for every font. And that's why I'm kind of hesitant of putting that in React UI.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Because I feel it's so hard to explain.
Yeah.
The moment you change your fonts, the moment you pick a different font, you have to do that again. Like, you have to tell, it's just essentially you need a config of saying that this much negative space, please.
Yeah.
Which is so hard. And I kind of am like, I don't know how many people care about it enough to use the hack.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I feel like I can sort of, I have this visceral feeling that there's like a tool there that could make that easy, right? Like, you have a visual tool where you can like see the space and you just like drag a slider to the right pixel and then copy the value and then you've got it, right?
Yeah.
But I just want that to exist, right? Like, I just want somebody to build that because I don't want to build it because it's so tedious.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. Yeah. It's like, I've been trying to do it for one font correctly. And that's why like React, like all the docs in React UI use Inter, because I don't want to do it again. So it's like, I have something working for one font, and now I'm going to use that font until I die.
Yeah, right. Okay, going on from that point, I find the stack component very interesting. We'll keep going with your list pretty soon. I just want to talk about layout for a bit.
Yes.
I've been digging into Braid's design system, and so this, by the way, in case anybody's listening and they have no idea what this tech stack is that we keep mentioning, it's called Basekick. If you search for Basekick in the Braid design system, or look for Mark Dalglish's talk at ReactiveConf 2018, he walks us through it, and it's really great. I think it's only, I don't think they write about it anywhere. I think it's only in the repo.
Okay.
Anyways, it's called Basekick, like that's what they call it. There's a SaaS implementation that they did like 4 years ago, but the one in React is obviously more interesting for us. The other thing I want to talk about is the stack component. Here's how I've been, because I've been thinking about, I'm building a thing called Strict UI, which is sort of a layer on top of Theme UI that also has many of these ideas in it. And I was thinking about this stack component, and I feel like personally it's a weird level of abstraction, because it seems to me, I think I have a prediction, right? In maybe, I want to say 5 years at the latest, hopefully way sooner, somebody's going to build a library of pure layout components that encompass 90% of all layouts on the web, because it's always the same thing, right? Like, it's always a sidebar and the main area. It's always a column with things. It's always a grid of cards, right? And so I was thinking about it, and I was thinking maybe I should build it, right? And I started digging into all the options that there are for layout and what people do. And then I realized it's way too much work. But actually, a lot of smart people on the CSS working group have already solved those problems for us with two things: Flexbox and CSS Grid. And so right now, the way I feel is this stack component is essentially just a wrap around Flexbox, right, in a way. I actually think that should be explicit. So I on my website, I have a Flex component, which just has the Flex properties with the added gap polyfill, the same one you have, right, in the stack, which I think is much easier to learn than the stack, but at the same time isn't as So I feel like the trade-off there is do you target it towards developers or towards designers? Because designers don't have most of them have no idea how exactly Flexbox work, right? Maybe they're aware of it. Many of them can code, right? I don't want to flame any designers here.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
They think about it in terms of stacks, right? Like you have horizontal stacks, vertical stacks, you have stacks of things. Whereas developers, we're really used to Flexbox, and we're used to doing, justify direction, justify items, align items. Now I got that wrong again. Justify content, align items, flex direction, things like that. What made you decide to have a stack rather than a sort of more raw Flexbox component?
Yeah, so I kind of want to challenge that with developers. I think we give ourselves a little more credit than we should, where like every time I have to design a page, or design is like design in the browser. So when I'm like composing a page, when I look at something, I'm never thinking about this is flex, justify, flex end, right? I'm always thinking about I have these blocks. I want to lay them out vertically, right? I want to stack them vertically. And then I want some gap. So it's almost like the syntax or the justify and align are always like an afterthought for me. Part of it, I blame the API as well. Like it's a very powerful pattern, which means the API is also very powerful. And the surface area is like super big, right? So you have like I still don't know start and flex start. Are they different? Are they the same? I don't know. It's like I've never had a use case where those two did different things for me. So this essentially, like with React UI, I'm not thinking too much about targeting designers. It's mostly for people like me who are wannabe designers, but they're front-end devs, right? So they're front-end devs, which is kind of like you're designing all day. You just have shittier tools. Like you don't design in Figma, you design by writing text. So a lot of components are like things that I would think of. Like I want to stack things. I don't want to flex box justify things.
Right? Yeah, right. Fair enough. That's great.
Which is also the API is kind of, so this is something that I feel guilty about. And this is where what you said becomes more relevant, where the direction, so the API is more like a sugar syntax on top of flex.
Yeah.
Which is where I feel a little conflicted, because this is how I would think, which is stack direction is vertical, right? I wouldn't say row or column, because I'm only thinking about row or columns in tables and in grids, not really when I have to put two things next to each other.
Yeah, right.
But it is under the hood, it is Flexbox. So you kind of do need to know about what Flex is, which makes it a slightly leaky abstraction.
Yeah, right.
I'm still conflicted about it, but like I've been using this for at least a month, and I kind of like it more than thinking about Flex.
Yeah, nice.
But that's just like one me, and I created it, so I'm obviously biased.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It might be a good idea, it might be a bad idea.
Yeah,
we'll find out.
Right. Cool. Let's keep going. What are the other ideas in React UI?
So stack with gap. Yes. So responsive syntax. This is something that I discovered in Style System, and I didn't really have to think about it differently at all. It works so well. And so this whole part is lifted from Style System, where for every CSS property, they let you write an array instead of just one value. So you can say width is 1/2 1/4. And then when this gets generated into CSS, they just replace it with media queries. So the first value is for mobile. The second one is for tablet. The third one is for desktop. Kind of going with the mobile first approach. And so React UI takes this without any hesitance, and it's like CSS, and you have this column component, and you give it height. So the first one mobile, second one tablet. And the breakpoints you define in your design tokens. And then what you get is you kind of can create a lot of things. I especially like using this with grid, because like the thing you said, right? Like there are few layouts and they're limited of them, but just having one layer under that abstraction makes it so much more powerful. So for example, you have these 3 columns. There's the sidebar and there's the half and half. Okay, I have to like go the other way around because mobile first. So on mobile, they take 12, or the grid is 12
Yeah.
units. So on mobile, all of them take 12 units, which means they're all full width. On tablet, you'd first see that the sidebar is still full, but the columns are half and half. And then on desktop, you finally get this, well, this is 2 units and this is 5 and 5.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting is that whenever you're creating responsive, at least for me, like I start with one, and then the other ones I forget about, and then I have to think about, okay, responsive. So then I used to just like at the end of my style.css, I would have media query and then bunch of overrides.
Yeah,
right? And tablet media query are a bunch of overrides. So with this, the idea is that you kind of either bring that thinking up front, where you start thinking about responsive sooner, or even if you don't, you kind of have the same building blocks and you go back and change things into an array and add things. So it's kind of, I like the idea of having both of them co-located.
Yeah.
The implementation is exactly like style system,
Yeah.
but with emotion under the hood.
Yeah. I love this.
So, this one. So now we're basically in the zone that Brent Jackson did things. I copied them and then changed them a little. That's the rest of the post. So, okay. Oh, this one. Sorry, the first one is not actually Brent Jackson, so that's fun. So I was looking at MDX, right? And how do you even style things in MDX? Because when you're writing Markdown, you can't attach a class name or a style to the header, right? You say hash and then you put the header. So MDX does a pretty cool thing where you can wrap your app in a provider, and then you can say headings just use my component, right? And you can give styles, class name, IDs, whatever. You can do whatever you want here. And that's a really cool way of giving some control to hidden layers of the UI, right? And that's kind of been my biggest complaint with open source component libraries. It's like, let me scroll down. You have a breadcrumb, right? And there's a breadcrumb separator. Now, when I get the breadcrumb, I want to change the separator color, but I don't have access to it because the breadcrumb is one component. So I want to go deep into it without having to say breadcrumb, first child, second child, things like that, and not access the tree. Because we used to do that in Auth0. Like we would access the child, and then there'll come a time where we want to change the structure of the component without changing the component API. So even though that's a non-breaking change, but the way we've implemented it by accessing the child, we just break everyone's app. Which felt stupid. It's like you shouldn't dive into the component to change what you want. That beats all the concerns. So I like what MDX did, and I kind of brought it into React UI, where in the theme provider, you can give another second prop called components. So the first one was tokens. The second one is components. And you kind of reference them by name, like we did with nested styles.
Data component selector, right?
With the data component, yep. And you can say breadcrumb, and this only goes to breadcrumb. You can nest. So this style will only go to links inside the breadcrumb.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have breadcrumb separator.
Mm-hmm.
So each component inside React UI has a name. And when you go to the docs, the names are listed, like all of these are the customizable items. So you can pick every internal element and style it. And the API can keep the same while the internal structure changes. Like I'm pretty sure I'm going to find an accessibility bug and I'll have to change the HTML structure. But at least with this, nothing else will break.
Yeah.
So, nice. And I'm pretty sure like this has its limits. Like just putting all your component styles in a object, this is like a theme file. And it works really well if you have multiple themes or if you have multiple projects like React UI. But I'm sure it's not going to fly with everyone.
Yeah.
Which is where the other approach is just import a breadcrumb and then re-export it with your own styles.
Yeah, right?
And you still have access to the same, like the names stay the same. So you still have access to that.
Yeah, because you can pass that to the CSS prop.
Exactly. So the CSS props understands names and understands your tokens.
Yeah.
And so this, it's like, when I was writing this, I wanted to start with this, but I was like, I have to first explain why. So that's why theme UI comes really down in this credit section. And the interesting part is like, because a lot of these concepts, like especially styled system and the spec for styled system, they come from the same people who built Theme UI. So a lot of these ideas are already in Theme UI. And I look at Theme UI and then look at something, and then I'm like, when I make a different decision, I have to doubt myself. It's like, why did I come? I almost feel like I took Theme UI, deconstructed it, and then constructed it again. And then I compare, like, what are the decisions, right?
Yeah.
And there are like only a few decisions that are different. And that's why I say like it's a reconstruction. It's not I wouldn't even say it's a fork at best. Which brings me to the idea that is super cool with variants, which is you can define your variants in the components. So now that we've established that theme can have components,
Yeah.
you can also add variants. And this is almost like a shortcut. Like you have a lot of time where you want to use a text and then you don't want to tweak it. Like you don't want to tweak the color. So you define like there's a subtle text and there's the normal text. And that kind of gives you a really nice API to do this. And this is the last part of the library, which is a lot of these things that I talked about, they're only as good as like the components in them. So Theme UI has a few components, and I've seen like Chakra has a few components, and I see every component library has like a bunch of them, but then you hit the limit, right? You have to create your own custom components.
Yeah.
And if your custom components don't use the same primitives, then you're kind of screwed because you don't carry the benefits forward, right?
Yeah.
So then it's like, I should have bookmarked that tweet. I tweeted this when I was working on this, and I asked people like, what do you care about in a component library? Like, do you care about how many components there are, or do you care about how abstracted the components are so that they're customizable? And like, this was my hunch, but customizability won by like a huge margin. And it's like, you kind of want to get those features in your components also. So that is where like extending the library is not even like extending, it's part of the library where you use the same primitives. Like I'm using I made this silly thing, which like is a stock component, I guess. And this is something that you would never have in the component library. So if you use stack and you say this is actually a UL so that it's semantic, and then you can give it some CSS to override the browser default. But other than that, all of this is part of the tokens.
Yeah.
When you use this component, you're saying, if the change is positive, use my success variant. If it's not, use my danger variant.
Yeah.
So it's all still part of the token system. So even though you've created your own components, they're still deeply connected to your tokens, and they're still deeply connected to the theming system, which one means that you can create themes very easily. And the second is that, which is like where this whole idea came from. So in Auth0, we had multiple applications. Not all of the applications had exactly the same colors or the spacing strategy, right? So the application had a very like a constricted space model, but then the help support docs had like, they were more blog form, so they had a lot more breathing space, a lot brighter colors and everything, but they still were on the same brand. So it's almost like even inside your company, not everyone will share the exact same tokens. You'll have to vary the tokens a little bit for every use case.
Yeah.
And that kind of has got me excited, where somebody else, or maybe me, like I can build another component. Say I build a stock component, and the stock component is opinionated. Wait, opinionated? Can you say that word?
Yeah.
It sounds made up when I say it, opinionated. But yeah, it's a word. So yeah, somebody can make a stock component, and then when you import it in your own application, it gets themed for your application. So that means you can have a set of components. And I think I heard you say this on React podcast, where there's like probably 100 components in the world, right? Like if you have create a set of 20, you've done 80%. If you create 100, you're probably at 95% of everything that everyone needs.
Yeah.
And that having that set of components that is also themable gets me really excited, because we can finally stop building components from scratch. It's like I'm kind of surprised we don't already have like a stencil that we just drag things from and say,
Yeah.
I don't need more components. I just need the same ones over and over,
Yeah.
but styled just a little bit
Yeah,
different.
exactly. Just themed, basically.
Just themed, exactly.
So that's actually what we're going to be working on at Gatsby. We have Blocks now, which is this visual editor for React apps, and as part of that, we want to make it usable for developers, of course, and it is great for developers because it's like if you've ever used Swift in Xcode, you have like your code and you have your preview, and imagine the same thing but in VS Code, right? Like you have a React JSX, but then you have a live preview and you can actually drag and drop around in the preview and it edits your JSX in real time, which is what Blocks basically does. But then we want to take that a step further and actually bring this editing experience to non-developers. And so that's why we're building a component library, or we're going to be building a component library of the, like you said, 50 probably most common components, solely because we want to be able to use them in blocks. So that somebody can come in, they can go, I want to create a new Gatsby site, and they get to see blocks and then already have the 50 most common components in there, and they can just start drag and dropping and building their own layouts together without any troubles. What
I feel like we've been talking about this. Yeah, I feel like we've been talking about this. There's this like a design tool. I don't know what to call it. There's a front end tool, which is not a design tool, and it's not our normal text-based VS Code editor. There's something in between, which is for visual coding.
Yeah,
exactly. Which I think we've been talking about it for like 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And then every year we move closer to this. Like Blocks is the closest I've seen to it.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited like where this goes. And I'm super excited like somebody will fork this and put their own ideas, which will then come back to Blocks. I'm really excited about like the direction where it's going.
Yeah.
I think we're still maybe a year away from it.
Yeah, it's gonna take a while. John is working on it. So this is all my I'm on a team with John and Jackson at Gatsby.
That's so cool.
And so John is working on Blocks a ton. Jackson's working on Theme UI a ton. I'm working on some other stuff, also Theme UI and Blocks, but also some new things. And this is really where we see it going. And React UI is really exciting to me because it's the same ideas in a similar form, right? Like you're clearly hitting the nail on the head there, which has me very excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited. The interesting part is, so I don't know if I have it around me. So there is this demo that I built with React UI, which was I think the same week or the next week after I saw Blocks UI.
Yeah.
And I saw this and I was like, shit, I want to work on that. Right? Because like I've been thinking about this and talking about this for a while. Yeah. So I took the components I had in React UI.
Yeah.
And I tried to make an editor out of it.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can control the components, like you know more about the building blocks, makes it so much more powerful.
Yeah.
So this is probably like, I don't know if you were writing CSS at the time. So this is I think it's 2011 where Chrome decided that with the dev tools you can edit stuff and you can hit Control S and it will save it back to your file.
Yeah.
Right. I think they still do it, but with CSS.
Yeah.
The tragedy is that we don't write CSS that way anymore.
Yeah,
right?
we don't write anything that way anymore. Not even JavaScript.
Not even JavaScript. Yeah. So it's like there is a compiler in between.
Yeah.
And your browser is too far from the compiler that the runtime doesn't really know anything about it. Yeah. So that's why I'm super excited about the whole theme of tools like Blocks UI, because this knows about the compiler. This knows about what goes before. It can parse props. It can add extra CSS.
Yeah.
And then commit it back to the source.
Yeah.
So we kind of get back to the same, because this is something that my coworker Sarah always says, is like, like modular scales, all of that is cool. But every time something doesn't work, I right click, open DevTools, and I tweak the CSS there.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what all of us do. Like you want visual feedback, right?
Yeah.
And our text-based tools are not it.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to just kind of forget about DevTools and start building our own DevTools for front-end coding.
That is such a great way of putting it. I love it. That is basically where Blocks is going. Blocks,
Yeah.
like what you see in this demo, the components are completely custom.
Mhm.
You can use your own components everywhere. Somebody asked in chat whether Blocks is only going to be stack based. Blocks doesn't care about whether it's a stack or not. It's your own components. You can use your own React components in there. You can use whatever components you want. What I was talking about with the component library was just for like when you're creating a new Gatsby site, and we want people who are not developers to be able to build websites, right? And so for them, we're going to be building a component library that sort of covers the 50 or 100 most common components. But really, Blocks is just a tool that you give a list of components, and then it puts together JSX based on what you drag and drop. And then you can edit the JSX and it'll update, or you can drag and drop, but it'll update the JSX. And that's really powerful. It's like a really powerful underlying framework, and I'm really excited to see what people are going to be building on top of that. And I think thinking about this as the new dev tools for React apps basically is a really interesting way of like even more like they're even more powerful than dev tools, right? Because in dev tools you can't drag and drop a piece of a website.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just really exciting. I John is a genius. John and Chris Biscardi, they figured out the way to make it edit JSX, and it's just incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I can't wait for this to be great.
I think that's the super powerful part. It's like we're working on the abstraction level that we now code in.
Yeah.
And that's what DevTools, like, to be fair to them, it's not their fault. They shouldn't actually build it just for React, right? Like DevTools has the responsibility to be on the runtime, right? Their stack is the runtime. But because we're like, there are 2 or 3 levels of pre-processing, you want your DevTools to be able to think at the level you're typing, the level you're composing.
Yeah.
But then compile down. That's really interesting. Something you said was interesting. You said it doesn't matter if it's theme UI or if you can bring your own components.
Yeah.
I wonder if that makes it harder. Like, it's like the more constraints there are, the better the tool can be.
Yes. So the way it works right now is that you can basically specify your own constraints. So you can specify this component can get these and these, like you can adjust these and these things about the component, and then we just render a set of controls for that, right? So what you see on the right side here with padding is just because all of these components just accept raw CSS, but many of your components won't. And so you'll just be able to expose exactly the controls that you want. You'll be able to say text like in React UI, you can say a text component has a variant of subtle, it has a variant of normal, a variant of maybe bold. I don't actually know what the specific variants are. And then you'll just get a drop down on the right side that says subtle, bold, normal, and that's it, right?
That's really cool. I feel like we already do half of that work by using either TypeScript or prop types.
Exactly. So there's this tool that we're going to be using. This is again, I find this so very interesting because all these ideas are sort of, it feels like in 2020, all this is going to come together. Everything everybody's been thinking about over the past 6 years is sort of finally coming together in this one. Like it's just somebody needs to make it happen. The thing is, now I lost my train of thought. I was going somewhere, but anyways, I'm really excited about what were you asking? Hold on. I just got so excited about this whole thing coming together.
I was like, people are already using TypeScript and prop types.
So there's
like one of those.
In 2016, I think, or maybe 2016, I think 4 years ago, Nick Graf, my best friend from Vienna, and I built a tool called Carte Blanche. And Carte Blanche was basically this sort of like storybook, but fully automatic. So rather than like creating stories yourself, it would parse your prop types or your flow types or your TypeScript types. And then it would output basically a storybook for you where you can adjust and fuzz every single component. And at the time, so there's this tool called React DocGen, which was already around in 2016 and is still around now and is still being developed. And I think now it's really stable because at the time it was kind of buggy. And so we want to use that for blocks, right? So that you don't even have to define any annotation, just parses your TypeScript types or prop types or flow types, which is what React DocGen does. So we don't even have to build it. And then outputs the right controls for you, which is extremely exciting. So you can just say, hey, here's my folder of components, right? I have a text component, I have a button component, I have a whatever component, and then you get a full drag and drop environment for your app, and you can plug together new pages like that. That's incredible. Yeah. I can't wait for that to happen.
It's like, as long as it's JSX, it's like the authoring format is more important.
Yeah.
But then it feels possible to like change that to support Vue and support Svelte, because they all are like, as long as it's components we're talking about, and as long as there is a way to pull out the controls, the reauthoring format is just like what gets generated, and that seems possible to have multiple formats. This is cool.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't actually thought about other frameworks, because that's the other like thing that I worry about, is like it seems like React is here to stay, and I'm happy that we're not fighting over frameworks anymore. But there is this sad part about the front end ecosystem is not just React,
Of
right?
course,
And
yeah.
the more opinionated tools get, the more we kind of leave out some of the people. So I like that the common denominator is, if you write components, you're good,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't matter how you author them, everybody can benefit from these ideas. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Blocks actually, I think, from what John has told me, I'm not 100% sure if this is true or not. So don't quote me on it. But Blocks is actually React agnostic. It just outputs,
Oh.
it just puts together JSX. So with
Mhm.
Vue, which also has JSX support, you should be able, in theory, to edit the JSX at least. The thing that's different is, of course, the rendering, right? Like you have to render the JSX
Yeah.
somehow. So I'm not sure if John
Yeah.
has put any controls into how the rendering works, but it should be possible, right? Like it shouldn't be a hard thing to do.
Interesting. Yeah, like that's not a constraint that's already there. That's like a choice for now,
Exactly.
and the format is agnostic. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Cool. This was awesome. We're going basically on an hour. I think it's a good time to end it here. This was an awesome
Mhm.
conversation. Any last words? Anything you want people to remember? What's the one thing you want people to remember? Use React UI. Follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, just go to
give a shout out.
react.ui.dev. And it's like, even if you don't want to use somebody else's components, which I kind of get, right? Like I built my own library instead of just using theme UI. So like I get it. So just go to react.ui.dev, and I've tried to document a lot of these core concepts. Just steal the ideas. I think there's so much we can steal from designers and design system world that we don't, because I don't know, we're kind of stuck in our ways. But yeah, there's this concept of like the adjacent possible, and I think we shun a lot of ideas because they come from somewhere else. But there's a lot of like, if you give it the time to like absorb those ideas, there's so many things that we can take from them and put in React, which would make our life so much better.
Such a
Yeah,
good
just
takeaway.
steal
I
my
love it.
ideas. Don't use my thing. Don't create any issues, because it's probably sucks. But just steal my ideas. That's all I want.
I love it. That was such a good takeaway. Thanks for tuning in, folks. I hope this was interesting. You should follow Sid on Twitter. It's in my I retweeted him. If you don't follow him yet, he's a super smart dude. Really cool, as you can see. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. This was fun. Best Sunday so far. All right, I'm gonna stop the stream here.